She's not here, but Pialani Snyder Crown says, if you have a why that makes you cry, that will propel you forward through anything. If you have a why that makes you cry. And Dave Sandoval has a why that makes me cry.
Oh.
And it pushes me forward every day. So thank you so much, Dave, for being the visionary here. I am going to turn it over to you. And when this guy talks, people listen.
So that's creating some expectations. So, but you know, the truth of the matter is, I didn't realize that was a quote. I was just gonna say that, well, you need a why that'll make you cry, and then it came out of her mouth, so she jumped ahead this time. But I don't even know how this thing works, but I think this goes forward. Yeah. Okay. So I think my sister Peggy provided these. I hadn't seen them.
Oh, wow.
But everybody faces challenges in life. How we respond to them. What it makes us is what's the most important thing, you know? And I say that, you know, my pathway's been paved by tragedy and failure in some people's eyes, but it was still the pathway that got me where I am today. And part of that pathway, part of those challenges are part of what I'm so focused on and what we call generational healing, okay? Generational healing is understanding that our great-grandfathers and our grandfathers and our fathers, or maybe our great-grandmothers and our grandmothers and our mothers, both, they created an arc toward the future. And we are in the center of that arc because we have the ability to be part of the change for our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren. So we sit in the center of 7 generational change. And we could help heal what some people call the sins of our fathers, or we could heal the failings of past generations by making things better for the next generations to come. And I believe that, you know, a lot of what I've been taught is really awesome, you know, and in my upbringing, but the one thing that they failed to teach me is that responsibility that I have for future generations, for the future of this planet, for, you know, the air that I leave behind, for the water that I leave behind, for the land that I leave behind. And am I gonna leave polluted air, land, and water for my children? Think about that. What are we gonna leave as an inheritance to the next generations? And it's pretty scary. If we look at some of the things that are, and I don't mean mine specifically, but maybe, but our forefathers, think about it, our forefathers, the forefathers that came before us and what they did to the arc of history and what we might need to do to change it. Well, if you've seen the movie Common Ground, who's seen that movie?
Woo!
Did you see that arc of history change in that movie through those generations?
Yes.
Did you see through those 3 generations what we did to our soil, what we did to our food, what we did to our children? So Purium is about changing all that. So, has anybody ever had a family member die unnecessarily because of environmental toxicity or chemical exposure or some type of cancer that didn't have some known meaning or trace? You know, this happens all the time. So anyway, my parents, they had their challenges. You know, they were married very young. They had 4 children by the time they were 20-something, mid-20s, early 20s. They struggled financially and emotionally. And I found myself looking for a way out of that house, you know, and they found many ways to get me out of that house, you know, sending me away to grandparents, send me away to, you know, to boarding school, send me away, just anywhere they could send me away, to be honest with you. And so at some point, my aunt and uncle, they helped me find a new place to live. They invited me to live with them. So I moved up to Northern California to the country, and near Lake Oroville, and that's me as a young boy sitting next to my uncle. And they gave me a room to sleep in that was all mine. I had never had that before. They gave me a nice car to drive that was mine to drive, and they fed me a lot of food. The cupboards were filled with food, stacked with food, but that food all came in cans, TV dinners, microwave dinners. And this was what my aunt considered very convenient, so she could spend her time teaching her kids how to do things like water ski and snow ski and, and play soccer and all these different things that she wanted to spend time doing with their kids. And she didn't want to do dishes and cook and clean and all that stuff. She just wasn't into it. She was into being with her family. And so she found these modern day advances to be so amazing, because now all she had to do was put something in the microwave. Dinner was ready in a minute. Pop something in the oven and she had a full meal in 10 minutes. Pour some instant potatoes into a bowl and mix in some hot water. It's really fast and convenient. And the way the commercials sold it, it was better than anything you've ever had before, because it's cheap, fast, convenient. You got your life back. And she bought into it. She bought into those commercials. She bought into that story. She bought into, the lies. Well, 6 months after being introduced to this beautiful, amazing, loving household, it was destroyed, disintegrated by her disease and her death from multiple sclerosis. And I found myself struggling again, but I had been exposed to something really important. I've been exposed to love. My auntie was so full of love. And if you see my sister Peggy around her somewhere, ask her what my aunt used to do for us on our birthdays, knowing how poor her brother, her sister-in-law was. So my auntie would take us on our birthday and do anything we wanted. She would come and rescue us for a day and take us out and do anything we wanted. Didn't care how much it cost, how much time it took her. She was that type of person. And so when she died, my uncle's life was very difficult, but she thought all these things, were cool. Going up and ordering food from a clown, that should have been a warning right there. Microwaved ovens. She loved these, preserved sausages and these TV dinners, And after she died, someone told me, you got to read this book. And I did, and it changed my life. I wrote my own version of this book, inspired by Rachel Carson, called The Toxin That Came to Dinner. And as I said, I want you guys not just to read it, I want you to learn from it. It's only 60 pages, and most of it's pictures. It's basically a cartoon book, okay? So anybody can read it real fast, and you can share it even faster because it's free, and the information is life-changing. Because it's gonna show the correlation. I'm not gonna say a causation, I'm gonna say a correlation. When you see that in the 1980s, the increase of this chemical glyphosate, and if you see the increase in diseases caused by inflammation and poor digestion and leaky gut, and you see these diseases, and you see that the increase in the number of diseases on a graph are increasing at the same rate that the tons of that chemical is being used in our agriculture. And the percentage of our food that contains it is the same percentage of our population that's now being in fact impacted by it. It's irrefutable in my mind, but you have to make your own decision. So Silent Spring talked about DDT, and eventually DDT was banned, but it's still used in Mexico. So if you get your produce from Mexico thinking that's cheaper and safer, don't. And I love Mexico, I'm just saying. So, I said earlier, I stand on the shoulders of giants. So, these people are amazing in my life, because when I had nothing to turn to, I turned to their wisdom. Albert Ann Wigmore, Bernard Jensen, Paul Bragg, Albert St. Georgi, but Hannah Kroger. Raise your hand if you ever heard that name, Hannah Kroger. A few of you still. The most amazing intuitive healer in the history of our country, I guarantee it. She could walk up and look at you and put her hands on you and tell you, you go and you make sure that you have your liver checked out. You go and you make sure you start taking these herbs, you start doing this, you stop doing that. She was amazing. and I got to follow her around for a while. Ann Wigmore, she's the one who inspired me to write the Green Food Bible. She's the one who taught me about the healing power of green food. She was a little monolithic. She was a narrow sort of vision. Although she was a visionary, it was narrow, so she didn't like to include other things like Bernard Jensen loved chlorella. Ann Wigmore wasn't such a fan of it. But Bernard Jensen was a fan of Ann Wigmore, you know. Bernard Jensen is the father of iridology. He wrote a nearly 2,000-page book on naturopathy. And unknown to most people, his wife, without his two wives, he couldn't have done anything because he couldn't read or write so well, as they say. But they would read to him and he would dictate to them, and amazing things happened. Well, I got blessed that in the last couple of years of his life, when he knew that he was nearing his end, they said he'd die in his 60s. He didn't die till he was 93. Okay, so how do you go backwards? There we go. So, and so he asked me to help him preserve knowledge that he was afraid would disappear, would go away. So people have heard me tell this story about Noah and the ark, and how when Noah started building that ark, everybody laughed. Everybody thought that he was crazy. And when he started putting things on the ark, they thought he was crazier. But we see a flood coming too. We saw the flood of chemicals coming. We saw the flood of disease coming. We saw the flood of misinformation coming. We saw the flood of medical bills coming. We saw the flood, unfortunately, of misery and death coming. Mm-hmm. And we started building an ark. And that ark is called pure and premium food. Because 75% of our food is known to have chemicals that will kill you. 100% of commercial cosmetics and personal care products are filled with chemicals that could kill you. And so people like Paul Bragg and Bernard Jensen and, you know, these people, they weren't afraid to speak the truth. And Albert Szent-Györgyi, you know, who is famous for vitamin C? It's not Albert Szent-Györgyi, is it?
Linus Pauling.
Linus Pauling. Who was Linus Pauling? He was a nobody working for Albert Szent-Györgyi, who took Albert Szent-Györgyi's work, bastardized it, sold it to the pharmaceutical companies, and got real famous for it. That Albert Szent-Györgyi studied real vitamin C, the nutrient vitamin C, not an antioxidant called ascorbic acid. And you mix high fructose corn syrup with digestive enzymes, it turns into ascorbic acid. Did you know that? Yeah, so they synthesize digestive enzymes, they put it into high fructose corn syrup, and they sell it to you and call it vitamin C. I think the kids would say, sucka. Right? Because they're being sold a bill of goods. And it's not, you know, it's not good, but it is turned out to be a lot of bills. So Albert Szent-Györgyi also created one of the ingredients in, somebody impressed me. Who said Biomedic? You rock star. Stand up, Michael. My man. Michael was once pretty famous in those Hollywood days, weren't you, Michael?
Well,
A little bit.
I got a few
little
left.
bit. Anyhow, yeah, Albert Szent-Györgyi saw that cows were getting really, really sick after they ate this grain that was being grown with glyphosate. And instead of trying to figure out a solution to glyphosate, he just had to figure out a solution to heal the leaky gut and the permeability that was created from the use of this chemical. And so he created the PreBioSure, which is it, the thing that contains a little bit of gluten, right? Because the cure is also the problem. If the problem came from the grain, then you needed a grain to deliver the solution. So PreBioSure actually is a byproduct of grain, but contains a very tiny amount of gluten, but just enough to make it not gluten-free. We'll talk about that later because it doesn't matter right now. The bottom line is that ingredient is in there, not because it removes glyphosate. okay? That ingredient is in there because it repairs the gut once there's no longer glyphosate damaging it, okay? So it's a full spectrum medic for your biome. That's why we call it biomedic. It's not just a glyphosate reducer. So anyway, like I said, I'm just really blessed that people who were really brilliant and really care were willing to work with me, and I was able to carry on their legacies to a certain extent. I've talked a long time about how you drive your car. Where is your car taking you? And that car is your calorie antioxidant ratio. What makes a superfood a superfood? Well, what makes a superfood a superfood is that it has a massive antioxidant to calorie ratio versus the other way around. If you look at most foods that we consume, they have a massive calorie to antioxidant ratio, which is not what we want. A lot of calories and a few antioxidants. Well, out of the 10,000 edible plants that have been identified from the oceans and the earth, less than 1% of them could be identified as superfoods, as containing a significant antioxidant to calorie ratio. And among those, very few are grown organically. So when you look at Purium products, and we deal only in that top 1% of foods, and we make sure that they're completely pure, organic, free of additives, chemicals, preservatives, artificial colorants, and all of that stuff that we find in this other food. So I'm going to tell you a story. Do I have a timer? Okay. So I'm going to tell you a quick story. Imagine that we're part of a nomadic tribe of hunters and gatherers, okay? And we haven't eaten for a day and a half, and all of a sudden we look off on the horizon and we see yellow, we see red, we see blue. What are we looking at?
Flowers.
Food, right? That's fruit hanging on trees, the original fast food. Okay? And you don't have to talk to a clown to get it. So, what did they do to us when they know that in our mind, when we see red, when we see yellow, when we see orange, when we see pink, we know primordially in our DNA that we should eat that. So look at this fake food where they put the colorings in there to make us believe that it's real food. They put the red, they put the yellow, they put the pink, they put the orange. But that food didn't grow that way. No, that pigment was added to fool your brain to make you think it's food. No, I'm telling you straight up that most of the food that people eat is harming them, causing them to suffer and even die. And yet they keep doing it. And there was somebody once who said, and I really don't like when people use demeaning words, but what did they say? The definition of not being so intelligent is when you do the same thing over and over and expect a different result. So let's raise our intelligence above that, at least. Let's at least acknowledge that our bodies are going to thrive on deep, dark, pigmented foods. Look at dark berry, look at our beet juice, look at our all of our things are all these deep, dark, pigmented things because that's where the magic is. So we got the sun up there, and we only see like a certain band of light, very small amount of light do we see. Do you know that there's light coming off of flowers that bees can see that we can't see?
I love that.
Yeah. Flowers actually are luminescent to the eyes of bees, and they can see things that we don't see. And the same thing is true, that the sun comes down in a range, I don't remember, but one of you geniuses tell me, what is it like, something like 100,000 different bands of light, right? Or is it 10,000 or 20,000? But it's a lot. And we only see 3 or 4 of them. What's happening with the rest of them? Well, guess who sees them? Plants do. Plants absorb certain bandwidths of light and interpret them into nutrients, interpret them into phytochemistry, interpret them into alchemy, for us to then use to heal. And the way that we could see it, since